The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, featuring Josh Edison and M. Dentith.
Hello and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy in Auckland, New Zealand. I am Josh Edison, and in Zhuhai, China, I'll have what she's having. It's Associate Professor M.R.X. Dentith.
I've never seen that film.
Really? Yeah,
No.
I quite like it.
I do enjoy a rom-com, but it's just not one of the rom-com. So I know the line, I know the film. I've never seen the line in context of the film.
Yeah, no, I quite like the film. To be honest, I think that scene got all the press, but it's probably one of the weaker scenes in the film, I think.
But it is endlessly quotable. Which is to say,
Sure
actually,
is.
when was the last time you actually used that line? Because I'm saying it's endlessly quotable. You'll probably go, yeah, the last time I used that line was about 12 years ago.
Probably, yes. So, how are things now? Actually, I was going to say how are things in your academic life, but I know maybe we need to be saving that for the bonus episode.
Indeed.
I believe there has been progress on your book.
Yes. So you have now seen a copy of Chapter 1. I have now completed a rough draft of Chapter 2. I'm not currently at work on Chapter 3 because I need to revise some papers and submit another paper. So I'm taking a break from writing Chapter 3 as I do other work. But I do want to get back onto Chapter 3 as soon as possible because I'm quite enjoying writing this book. I don't know whether anyone's enjoying reading it, but I'm enjoying writing it. And isn't that the most important part? I mean, in the academic world, no. Actually, what's more important is whether people like what
getting
you write.
cited and referred to, and
writing a book that actually that's not true. Writing a book that nobody likes but gets published is also a good thing because if you write something that everybody hates, then they're going to cite it.
Yes. Well, maybe we, as a bit of methadone to the heroine of your writing addiction, we can talk about someone else's Chapter 3 this episode. Do you think that'll tide you over?
Oh, I like the way you've managed to segue from my proposed book on conspiracy theories to a book that's already been written on conspiracy theories and was published 5 years ago.
Yes, so this is our second look at Conspiracy Theories by Quassim Cassam from 2019. Last week we looked at chapters 1 and 2. This time, chapters 3 and 4.
And this time it's personal. I mean, you say that's it, but we'll talk about that at the end of today's podcast.
Yeah,
because it's actually not. This is part 2 of 3.
Okay, you lied to me. It's fine. I'm
did.
I'm used to being made to read under false pretenses from you.
But Josh, at least I didn't lie to you through dance this time.
Yeah, I guess that's fine. Well, play a chime, and I'll just get on with it.
I'll play the chime. You seethe in quiet fury. Welcome to Conspiracy Theory.
So, Chapter 3, let's dive straight into it. Chapter 3, which I'm looking at, and Em will be handling Chapter 4. Chapter 3 is called The Problem with Conspiracy Theories. So you'll recall from last time, Chapter 1, he was talking about why conspiracy theories are likely to be false, and why the fact that they're likely to be false means they actually function as propaganda. And he's going to be referring to that a bit in Chapter 3. He's also going to keep doing the thing that we talked about last episode. If you recall, he says he's interested in these sort of extraordinary conspiracy theories, the one that have his particular properties that means that they're likely to be false. And he calls these ones conspiracy theories in the uppercase with a capital C and a capital T, and uses conspiracy theory all in lowercase to refer to just the general term of any theory about a conspiracy. And last time that got a little bit tricky because there were points where he swapped back and forth, but mostly he stuck to the uppercase part. I think this one it's going to get even trickier. So you might just have to bear with us in a few places as we have to stop and explain exactly what kind of conspiracy theory he's talking about, such as in the very first paragraph of chapter 3, which goes, "We live in a world in which governments, including Western governments, are often up to no good. They lie, cheat, and conspire. There are well-documented examples of conspiracies by US government agencies such as the CIA, and it's vital that their claims about what they are and are not up to are thoroughly investigated. Democracy needs people who are prepared to look into evidence of bad behavior by our political masters, including evidence of conspiracy. These people are conspiracy theorists." And it should be
Bravo,
pointed out that
Kassam!
A,
Bravo! Those are words we could live by. I mean, this is an absolute
well,
turnaround
exactly.
from chapters 1 and 2. Absolute turnaround. I love the twist. It's a really great way. You drag them in and then you drag them back out again.
Well, not so fast, because in that chapter, every instance of the word conspiracy and conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist was in lowercase. So he was talking in the general sense this time. And as you say, this sounds like the opposite view from what he's been saying in chapter 3, and it turns out that's because it is. He continues saying, "This is the thinking that leads philosopher David Cody to conclude that conspiracy theorists are performing an important task on behalf of the community." So he was actually summing up David Cody's position there, which is one that we've looked at before, although in this case he's referring to David's What to Believe Now, Applying Epistemology to Contemporary Issues. Is that one we've looked at, or is that a book?
It's a
or
book.
something else?
So he has a book that was published by, so it's a Rutledge imprint, so it's Blackwell. What to Believe Now, Applying Epistemology to Contemporary Issues. It has a chapter on conspiracy theories. Interestingly enough, it was a chapter that was going to be co-written with Charles Pigden, but Charles didn't have the time to work on it, so David wrote the chapter on his own, but there's a credit to Charles at the end. And yes, it's a chapter of a book. So we haven't actually looked at that particular text, in part because it's a synthesis and summary of David's work prior to that point. So there's nothing novel or new in it. He's simply taking the work he's done on conspiracy theory and put it into an applied epistemology text.
Right. So Cassam sort of sums up Cody's views here. Cassam says that Cody says that a conspiracy theorist, again still in lowercase, is a person who is unusually willing to investigate conspiracy. That conspiracy theorists, again lowercase, perform an important social function by investigating evidence of conspiracies, and that even if a theory is wrong, it's good that someone looked into it. Cassam says that Cody says that even when they're wrong, conspiracy theorists harm only themselves, and that conspiracy theorists are less harmful than conspiracy skeptics.
Now, some of those claims are true, and the other claims, I think, are either overstatements or gross generalizations, because it is the case that Cody is saying, well, look, we should probably not use a pejorative term like conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist because they are akin to the term witch hunt. If we're going to use those terms, we need to be aware that conspiracy theorist, in the Charles Pigden sense, is just about anyone. So a conspiracy theorist is someone who is willing to entertain the existence of a conspiracy. And David is committed to the claim that conspiracy theorists, in that sense, play an important social function because they are looking into claims of conspiracy to work out whether they are real claims of conspiracy or vapid or deservedly suspicious conspiracy theories. And it is true, he says, look, in many cases, when conspiracy theorists are wrong, their wrongness really only harms themselves, but he's not saying they only harm themselves. That's where Cassam is kind of drawing a really broad brush here.
Yes, but nevertheless, that's the claim he takes issue with, because this chapter is largely going to be Cassam spelling out exactly how conspiracy theories are harmful. Now, having just summarized David's views using his general lowercase conspiracy theory definition, he then continues, "My focus in this book has been on conspiracy theorists, now with a capital letter," so these are his people who believe in his extraordinary, implausible conspiracy theories. "My focus in this book has been on conspiracy theorists, people who are excessively willing to believe conspiracy theories," in capital letters. "These aren't just theories about conspiracies, they are theories about conspiracies that are unlikely to be true for the reasons given in Chapter 1. Is it true that conspiracy theorists, again capitals now, harm only themselves? Imagine being the parent of a child who's just been shot dead at her elementary school and having to listen to people who claim that the shooting was a false flag operation in which no one died. How can anybody think that such theories only harm the people who put them forward?" So when talking about David's views, he uses one definition of conspiracy theory and theorist, and then switches to his other definition when he's talking about his own views, which is makes it a bit difficult to read. And it gets even more difficult when he then starts swapping between the two within the same sentence. Talking about, sort of giving an introduction of what he's going to be talking about in this chapter, he says, "This chapter is about the various ways in which conspiracy theories, capital, harm all of us. Cody calls people who vilify conspiracy theories lowercase and conspiracy theorists lowercase conspiracy baiters. He has a problem with conspiracy baiters. My problem is with conspiracy apologists, people who make excuses for conspiracy theories, now uppercase, and downplay the serious harms they do. These are of different kinds: personal, social, intellectual, and political. Conspiracy apologists risk becoming apologists for the political causes that conspiracy theories, capital letter, have promoted. People who talk about the good that conspiracy theories, capital letter, should should think long and hard about this. Our political masters need to be held to account, but spreading wild conspiracy theories, capital C, is the wrong way to do that." So again, even with one sentence, he uses his definition when he's talking about himself, and then immediately switches back to the other one when he's talking about David's views. And he never really addresses the fact that he's switching definition. Possibly he just thinks it's clear. The fact that he is clear, he has this different capitalization scheme. I guess he thinks makes it clear which definition he's using at which point, but he doesn't. And the fact that he uses the lowercase and uppercase differently suggests that he is aware that he and David are talking about different things at times, but he then just sort of carries on talking as though it's the same thing all along. And he certainly never at any point says, "Now you'll notice that I swapped back and forth here. That's because," or justifies doing that. So it does get a little bit thorny in this case.
Yes, it's almost as if he's going nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You know what David Cody's really talking about. He defends conspiracy theories in the lowercase in his writings, but really he's defending conspiracy theories in the uppercase, as I, Cassam, have defined them. There is something very odd about this chapter, because you'll note he also is calling Cody and is about to call Charles Pigton a conspiracy apologist. And they're conspiracy apologists because
Yes.
he's taking it that they are apologizing for capital C, capital T conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theorizing. But it's very clear they're not talking about Kassam's conspiracy theories in the uppercase, because the definition they have of conspiracy theory is the lowercase definition of conspiracy theory that Kassam himself put forward in the first chapter. So he's chiding David and Charles for subscribing to views that Kassam himself subscribes to, but he just isn't willing to say, "Oh, these earlier philosophers have somehow got there first."
Yeah, so I think when we get to looking at what Kassam has to say about Charles Pigton later on in this chapter, I think that'll become even more clear. But for now, it's just a bit confusing. But at any rate, at this point, he's done talking about David Cody's views just for the moment, and he's back to talking about conspiracy theories with a capital C and a capital T, and nothing but for this point. So from now on, until I say otherwise, when you hear the word conspiracy theory, it'll be with a capital C and a capital T. So in other words, his particular special view of these extraordinary, implausible conspiracy theories. And the point he wants to say is that his capital C, capital T conspiracy theories can cause all sorts of harm. So he's mentioned personal harm, and as an example of this, he goes on to give the example of harm to Clay Shaw's reputation and livelihood. Clay Shaw was a man who Jim Garrison accused of being involved in the Kennedy assassination, and took him to court, and was eventually, his Garrison's views of the Kennedy assassination were rejected, and the case came to nothing, but it nevertheless ruined Clay Shaw's reputation and indeed ate up all his money in legal fees. So that's personal, but then he goes from there to about how conspiracy theories can cause social harm. And an example of this, he gives anti-vax conspiracy theories leading to large numbers of preventable deaths, again, and the same thing for AIDS-related conspiracy theories of the sort believed by Thabo Mbeki in South Africa. And we talked, when did we talk about Nirvana? And not Nirvana, the Foo Fighters?
Oh, that was a year, maybe two
It was a
years
while
ago.
ago. So I think people at the moment have been saying, okay, yes, Dave Grohl cheated on his wife and got another one pregnant. That's a bit shit, but probably not as shit as promoting AIDS conspiracy theories that led to quite a number of deaths in avoidable deaths in South Africa. So there's the harms to people and groups of people in society, but then moreover there are other kinds of harm that can be done. So Cassam says causing unnecessary deaths is an example of a serious social harm. The social harms caused by conspiracy theories are related to the ways in which they are intellectually harmful. One such way is the fact that they prevent us from knowing things that we would otherwise know. Conspiracy theories are obstacles to knowledge, and because of that, they are also harmful to us in other ways. And so then we get to a bit of good old-fashioned epistemology when we talk about knowledge and what it means to know stuff. So talking about knowledge, he gives the example of a parent who at first knows that MMR vaccines are safe because they've been told so by a doctor who's an expert in this field and is an authority that you would listen to. But then they go and read a bunch of anti-vax stuff on the internet and no longer consider that they know MMR vaccines to be safe. Or in other words, they no longer have the confidence to say that they know the MMR vaccine is safe. And so Kassam goes over a bit of sort of what it means to count as knowledge, and in particular the properties that he's interested in is the fact that to know something, that thing must be true, and you must be confident of it. And in epistemology, there'll be other conditions, perhaps, in how you might want to define knowledge. But it's the truth and the confidence that he's particularly interested in.
Well, the truth and the justification. Where
Justification, yes.
justification
Yeah.
might be confidence. I think the thing which is interesting about his example here is that he starts off by saying, look, the parent knows the MMR vaccine is safe, but because their confidence can be very easily undermined. Undermined.
Close
Because their
enough.
confidence can be easily undermined by new information. You might say, well, actually, they didn't know MMR vaccines were safe in the first place. They had a justified belief, and obviously that justification was malleable in some sense. So he might be studying from the wrong premise here. It's not that the conspiracy theory undermined knowledge here, it was that the parents didn't know why they were justified in believing the vaccines were safe in the first place. And that's demonstrated by the fact that it was very easy to undermine their belief with new evidence. But
Mm.
that's one of those debates we have in epistemology about how much justification is adequate justification to make the claim that someone knows something as opposed to just believes it.
Yes, and in any case, I think we could all agree that there's been an undermining of confidence, if not knowledge, and it's
I
the
mean,
confidence is
my
what he seems
my
to be
my confidence is undermined right now,
on a regular
but that's because I'm
basis.
sitting very awkwardly.
Hmm. But so he's interested in a case like this. Why would you be confident in anti-vaxxers over doctors, and yet people are? And this leads him into a talk of sources, your source of information, and this is I think he says is or he wants to say is that your confidence can at least in some cases come from the source that you're the source of your information. If it's a good source, which he defines a good source as something that is qualified and trustworthy, then you can be confident of what you're hearing. And so he then brings us into the idea of expertise. Experts are people who are qualified, trustworthy sources. He says, being qualified is often a matter of having actual qualifications obtained by study. The cardiologist who tells me about my heart has degrees to prove that she is an expert. Another aspect of being qualified is having the right kind of experience. An experienced cardiologist is more qualified to tell me about my heart than someone fresh out of medical school. Lastly, a genuine expert is one who is recognized as an expert by her peers. If nobody else in her profession thinks she's any good, then she isn't an expert. And so then
Now,
this
we're going
goes
to come
back.
back to expertise in the next chapter. So, if
Yes,
you're listening along to this, which presumably you are because you are listening to a podcast, but if you're paying attention to the podcast, put a pin in
put
this
a pin in
because
that one.
expertise becomes a bit of a problem for Cassam.
Yes, at this point, though, he repeats the claim he made back in Chapter 1 that many, if not most, conspiracy theorists, again, we're still in capital letters, they're not experts in the field that relate to their conspiracy. They are amateurs in this sense. And he says conspiracy theorists will appeal to their own experts, though, but often they'll be someone like Andrew Wakefield, if we're still talking about MMR vaccines and the like.
And the thing was, he was kind of an expert. He just was an expert who had expertise that wasn't in consensus with the rest of the experts in his field. He wasn't an amateur. He just wasn't one of those experts.
And indeed one who was then later discredited. I mean, I've heard people just sort of anecdotally referring to just scientists, quote unquote scientists, or lots of scientists believe that. I saw a debate between a scientist and a flat earther or something. The flat earther just kept saying, yeah, lots of physicists think this, without ever even naming a source, but obviously believing that he had sources for his information. But looking at the likes of Andrew Wakefield, he, as you say, was an expert, which is why people listened to him when he first put out his paper. But then it turned out, people looked into it and discovered that his study was not to proper academic standards, and it was withdrawn and he was discredited.
And also his paper was published in one of the most premier medical journals in the world. So it wasn't just he was an expert who turns out to not have been a particularly good expert. He published in the right publication. And
so yes,
that publication kind of showed he was considered to be an expert at the time.
At the time, he was an expert. Nowadays, he is considered to have been debunked. So if a person were appealing to Andrew Wakefield in the year of our Lord 2024, then yes, that's probably not a suitable source. Now, talking about the situation like Andrew Wakefield, where an ex-person who is held up as an expert has been discredited, Cassam says that faced with the discrediting of the experts, conspiracy theorists do one of two
experts
things.
There was in scare quotes.
Sorry, it was, yes, I should say experts was in quote marks. Faced with the discrediting of their quote-unquote experts, conspiracy theorists do one of two things. One is to suggest that just because their experts aren't recognised as such by their establishment peers, it doesn't mean that they aren't experts. Who is and isn't a real expert is all relative to one's point of view, so anti-vaxxers are perfectly entitled to regard Wakefield as an expert by their own lights. The other response is to say that there's something wrong with the whole idea of expertise and deferring to experts. And a little bit later says either response is a form of intellectual suicide. And that phrase sparked a recollection in me. I had to look back through notes. It was Charles Pigden who, in one of his papers, when we've looked in past, talked about the idea of committing epistemic suicide or historical suicide by taking certain attitudes towards conspiracy theories, which was interesting because, like we've already mentioned, Charles Pigden is going to show up in this chapter. But not quite yet.
Yes, and not in the best light.
No, because Cassam hasn't finished talking about the intellectual harms that can result from conspiracy theories. He says they contribute to the death of expertise. I didn't actually write it down, but he does cite the person who came up with this phrase, death of expertise, that has been mentioned in more recent times. And he says that contributing to the death of expertise is not just intellectually harmful in its own right, it also explains how conspiracy theories are obstacles to knowledge. Given how much we all rely on experts to know about the world we live in, anything that prevents us from acquiring knowledge from experts is an obstacle to knowledge more generally. It's difficult to imagine anything that more effectively prevents us from acquiring knowledge from experts than the suggestion that there is no good reason to rely on them, or the notion that who is and isn't an expert is a purely subjective matter. It isn't. And then goes from this into the idea that these intellectual consequences can then have political consequences, talking about, say, Brexit in Great Britain and the election of Donald Trump in 2016.
Luckily, that's never going to happen again. There's no threat of Trump. I mean, yeah.
Good times to live in. And then this, obviously talking about that it all leads to political consequences, goes back to his claim that the purpose of conspiracy theories is as propaganda. He says, it's no surprise that conspiracy theories have political consequences. If their role is to promote a political cause, then conspiracy theories are as politically harmful as the causes they promote. A number of these causes have been extremist, racist causes. Although conspiracy theorists might dissociate themselves from such causes, it is nevertheless true that they operate in an ideological space with a long anti-Semitic tradition. That ideological space is one that has been occupied by fascists and other extremists, and this is an inescapable fact that any analysis of what conspiracy theories mean in practice has to acknowledge. And goes on to point out that even if you sort of have moderate conspiracy theorists, still with the capital letters, so people who might appeal to sort of your New World Orders or Illuminatis, but who would not consider themselves to be anti-Semitic and don't express anti-Semitic views, they still get caught up in these theories because they can't change the fact that that's the space these conspiracy theories exist in. Cassam, he gives the analogy of people who fly the Confederate flag, although I think the swastika would probably also work as an example here of something that has, as people might point out, the swastika has been a symbol used by cultures all over the world for a very, very long time. Doesn't change the fact that these days it has very, very marked associations. But in his words, Cassam says, in the same way, conspiracy theories have a life of their own with their own history and meaning. They symbolize a particular worldview, and that worldview is one that has always scapegoated and demonized particular groups of people, Jewish people more often than not. The non-racist who insists that conspiracy theories per se have got nothing to do with anti-Semitism is in the same position as the Southerner who argues that the Confederate flag per se has nothing to do with slavery. In both cases, the answer is the same. You don't get to decide what things mean. The history of conspiracy theories is not something from which even politically progressive conspiracy theorists can separate themselves. So now he starts getting into Charles Picton's work. He starts this section by saying, conspiracy apologists, again, this is his term for people who attack, who are opposed to his conspiracy theories with a capital C and a capital T. Conspiracy apologists think that people who attack conspiracy theories must be friends or agents of the Western political establishment. For example, if a conspiracy theory blames the Bush administration for 9/11, then doesn't it follow that people who say that this theory is hogwash must be friends of the Bush administration? But the fact that a person criticizes conspiracy theories doesn't mean that this person can't be as critical of governments and government agencies, which seems like a fair point. You can say 9/11 conspiracy theories are nonsense, but that doesn't mean you're a massive fan of what any particular US administration is doing in any number of arenas.
Well, I mean, as we're discovering with the election campaign in the US, lots of people say, look, I think Trump is a terrible human being, but it doesn't mean he wouldn't make a good president. People have lots and lots of views which sometimes intersect or don't intersect with other views they have.
Yes. So this leads into a look at the works of Charles Pigton, who Cassam refers to as a philosopher who has made a name for himself as a conspiracy apologist. And again, remember...
Now, I'm going to take umbrage on Charles's behalf here, because Charles has written quite a number of important papers on conspiracy theory and philosophy. But Charles has actually made a name for himself as someone who writes on ought versus is. So, ethical theories of can we derive oughts from is statements. And that's his chief contribution. That's what he will be known for in philosophy, is his work on ought and is. He will be known for his work on conspiracy theories as well, but primarily his contribution to the discipline is on ought and is. So I think this is actually throwing shade at Charles here by dismissing the other important work he has done. Oh, look, this is just one of these people who does work on conspiracy theories. We can ignore him.
But and again, remember, earlier on in this paper, Cassam defined a conspiracy apologist as someone who defends conspiracy theories with a capital C and a capital T. He says, so a conspiracy apologist is someone who thinks that, who doesn't just think conspiracy theories in general, not the lowercase version, are worth defending. There's someone who actually defends his extraordinary, implausible conspiracy theories with a capital C, which I think, even if you ignore the sidelining of Charles's other work, I don't think that's a fair thing to be saying about him at all. But he goes on to talk about his views, and as we just saw with David Cody above, he starts chopping and changing between his definitions of conspiracy theory. He says, according to Pigden, when people say we shouldn't believe conspiracy theories, now in the lowercase, what they really mean is that we shouldn't believe conspiracy theories, still lowercase, that accuse Western governments of involvement in evil schemes. Now, I should say, he's looking in particular at Charles's 2007 paper, Conspiracy Theories and the Conventional Wisdom, which is one we have looked at back in 2021. And he does talk, at the end of the paper, he talks about the conspiracy theories about Western governments, and it's certainly a lot more complicated than Cassam puts it here. I sort of had a quick flick through our notes again, and from what I gather, it was he was talking about a particular scenario of your Tony Blairs and David Camerons sort of replying to conspiracy theories around the war in Iraq and dodgy dossier and that sort of stuff. And he says there's a lot of sort of reacting to another view, and it didn't really seem to be a general statement that conspiracy theories are all about Western governments, and if you don't believe conspiracy theories, that means you shouldn't believe theories. The whole Western governments thing, I think, is a bit of a side issue. But
yeah, Giles is just pointing out that we often tend to think of conspiracy theories as being something that are believed or occur elsewhere. And we certainly don't think of our own government as promoting conspiracy theories. And so, look, that's a weird double standard we have here. So no, he's not making the claim that Cassam makes on his behalf. As you point out, he's making a much more sophisticated, almost linguistic point about how the label conspiracy theory gets applied in political discourse.
But so this idea that we shouldn't believe conspiracy theories that accuse Western governments of involvement in evil schemes, he says, nobody in their right mind would recommend such a policy, and certainly not people whose objection to conspiracy theories, now in capital letters, is that they promote right-wing causes. Anyway, as we saw in Chapter 1, a conspiracy theory, again we're in capital letters now, isn't simply a theory that posits a conspiracy, it's a theory about a conspiracy that is unlikely to be true. Not believing such theories is quite consistent with believing evidence-based historical accounts of actual conspiracies, including accounts of conspiracies mounted by Western governments. The problem with conspiracy theories is not that they accuse Western governments of conspiracy, but that they aren't based on solid evidence and have a political agenda that conspiracy apologists should look at long and hard before leaping to their defense. So yeah, I mean, again, this seems even more sort of problematic than he was talking about David. He gives Pigden's view with his lowercase version of conspiracy theories, and then immediately starts talking about his uppercase conspiracy theories as though that's what Charles had been talking about, when by his own schema it wasn't. I was reading through this thinking, what is he doing here? I thought maybe the charitable reading of the way he puts this out could be that he's just saying that Charles's views don't really affect his own views because they're talking about different things. But a less charitable reading would be that he's trying to refute Charles's views, but doing it in kind of an underhanded way by swapping definitions on the fly. This becomes more of a worry further on, as he says, in general, conspiracy apologists have surprisingly little to say about the actual history of conspiracy theories, and again, we're back to capital letters the whole time, or about the political causes they have been used to promote. The anti-Semitism of many conspiracy theories is either not mentioned at all or only mentioned in passing. But if conspiracy theories are used to promote right-wing anti-Semitic causes, then conspiracy apologists and conspiracy theorists make strange bedfellows. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. The fact that conspiracy theorists and conspiracy apologists share a strong dislike for Western foreign policy isn't an excuse for conspiracy apologists to overlook the history and political associations of conspiracy theories. So that was uppercase the whole time, but when Charles who he's accusing of being one of these conspiracy apologists, was talking about conspiracy theories, he wasn't using that definition. He was using the lowercase definition. And the fact that Cassam switches to exclusively using this other definition while still seemingly talking about the kind of position that Charles has certainly makes me feel a lot less charitable towards his arguments. I really don't know what he's angling for here, if he's not just being a little bit dishonest.
And that's the thing, because he is actually quite careful in his writing to distinguish between when Charles talks about conspiracy theories, mention that Charles is talking about lowercase conspiracy theories, and then switching back to when he's talking about conspiracy theories, talking about uppercase conspiracy theories. It's quite clear that on some level he knows that Charles and David are not using the terminology the way he is using it, which is confounded by the fact that one of the examples in chapter one of a conspiracy theory that Kassam says is plausible is the weapons of mass destruction story, which both Charles and David have talked about. So it is tempting to think he's being underhanded here because he's being very careful in the way he ascribes views to people when discussing them directly. It's only when he goes on to talk about his own view and implies that conspiracy apologists like Charles and David are also talking about conspiracy theories in the uppercase does he start to make these implications.
Hmm. At this point, he gives an example of Noam Chomsky as being a person who is critical of Western governments without being a capital C conspiracy theorist. So, which does make it sound he makes it sound like if this is something he brings up as a contrast, he does appear to be saying that conspiracy apologists are capital C conspiracy theorists, which I don't believe either of the people he's called conspiracy apologists would agree with. Um, he says if you're critical of Western governments, there's no need to get capital C conspiracy theories involved, and indeed they can distract from the real problems since they can give what he calls personal explanations to things that are actually institutional or structural problems, which is a fair point, and I don't think it's a point that Charles or David would disagree with.
No.
Anyway, even if all of this aside, could it still not be the case that conspiracy theorists perform an important function, which is what was suggested when he was going over David's views at the start of the chapter? Can't maybe conspiracy theorists are good things, although again I should note that when he was talking about David's views to begin with, he said that it was lowercase conspiracy theorists who David said perform an important function by investigating these things. But we're back to the capital C's now. Couldn't even your capital C conspiracy theorists perform an important function in looking into these things? Well, to that, Kassam says, the problem with this is that in the real world, conspiracy theorists tend not to be serious and impartial seekers of truth who base their claims of conspiracy on actual evidence of conspiracy. That's what makes them conspiracy theories with a capital C and a capital T. That's his words, not mine in this case. They are often more like Jim Garrison in that they are too willing to believe in conspiracy. They exaggerate evidence of conspiracy and ignore evidence against their theories. What the community needs, if it is to look into evidence of political conspiracy, is people with sound judgment, relevant expertise, and good investigative skills. People with these attributes are unlikely to be conspiracy theorists, capital letters, with their strange obsessions and habit of jumping to sensational conclusions on the basis of flimsy or non-existent evidence. Conspiracy theorists are above all propagandists. They pretend to be serious researchers, but the reality is that their theories tend to be politics-based rather than evidence-based. They might occasionally get something right, but that is more a matter of luck than judgment. A nation that actually wants to know the truth about 9/11 shouldn't be relying on the insights of a bunch of right-wing talk show hosts and retired academics. And again, this sounds completely compatible with what David and Charles were saying. Neither of them were talking about Kassam's capital C conspiracy theories. So that it's again the switching of definitions. It starts to feel more and more dodgy. And indeed, how do we know if a lowercase conspiracy theory is actually an uppercase conspiracy theory? In order to be confident in saying that this is one of these implausible ones under Kassam's definition, surely you'd need to look into them a little bit.
I mean,
So
especially
you do
since
need
he's
people
already
investigating these things.
committed to the claim that conspiracy theories, if they're not explicitly anti Semitic, are crypto anti Semitic. So you can't just look at a conspiracy theory and go, oh, that's an anti Semitic conspiracy theory, therefore it's right wing propaganda. You might go, oh, that conspiracy theory doesn't look anti Semitic, therefore I can't just conclude it's right wing propaganda. I better look at the particulars of that theory and work out whether it is in fact right wing propaganda. So you get to this kind of what I call the peculiar problem of generalism. How do you get to this notion that you have a general dismissal of these things called conspiracy theories unless someone is doing some degree of investigation behind the scenes?
Hmm. So he says, again, talking about what his conspiracy apologists get wrong, he says it's not that conspiracy apologists are unaware of the gap between the theory and the reality of conspiracy theories. The problem is that they underestimate the extent of the gap and idealize conspiracy theorists. But I would say that the other problem is that they're using a different definition of conspiracy theory and conspiracy theories. So, yeah, at this point, I found I was using bold and italics when spelling out what I was thinking here, which I think was a sign that I was getting little bit overly frustrated reading this. So it's probably a good thing that this is basically the end of the chapter. He said what he thinks are the harms of his capital C conspiracy theories and concludes by leading into the next part. Chapter 3 finishes. All of this leaves us facing a practical problem. If conspiracy theories are really as problematic as I've been arguing, then what should we do about them? Should we try to rebut them, or is it better to ignore them since nothing is going to change the conspiracy theorist's mind anyway? That sounds tempting, especially given how bruising arguments with conspiracy theorists can be. At the same time, how can it be right to leave conspiracy theories unchallenged if they're harmful in the ways that I have been describing? These are the questions I'll be tackling in the final chapter of this book, which is chapter 4, which is the one you looked at.
Yes, chapter 4, how to respond to conspiracy theories. And I was very tempted to say, well, look, all Cassam basically says is mock and shun them. Case closed, let's walk away. But I feel, to be fair to the audience, we should say slightly more about Kassam's policy recommendations as to how to respond to capital C, capital T conspiracy theories. And he starts with 9/11, and he starts with a 9/11 Commission report and talks about the problems of, complex events like 9/11 require complex explanations. And so there are conspiracy theories about 9/11, and they're very hard to rebut. And he goes, the problem is that rebutting a theory won't necessarily persuade its supporters to give it up. Rebutting is one thing, persuading is another. It is theories that are rebutted or not, but people who are persuaded or not. Whether a theory has been rebutted depends on whether it has in fact been proved to be false using good arguments and trustworthy information. Persuasion also requires that the person you are trying to persuade accepts that his theory has been disproved. Experience suggests that conspiracy theorists, capital C, capital T, tend not to be persuaded by arguments against their theories. There aren't too many examples of committed conspiracy theorists changing their mind. Now, of course, this once again hinges on whether we mean conspiracy theorists or conspiracy theorists. It seems to be kind of built into his definition of conspiracy theorist that these people are the kind of people who don't change their minds according to evidence. But this is complicated by the fact that two people that I'm fairly sure Kassam thinks are exemplar examples of conspiracy theorists in the capital C, capital T variety, one Alex Jones and the other David Icke, are people that we know have changed their minds about at least some of the capital C, capital T conspiracy theories they have believed. So Alex Jones thought that Sandy Hook was a false flag. He now claims he doesn't believe that. David Icke has had various views, such as believing himself to be the Christian Messiah. He no longer believes that to be the case. They are people who are conspiracy theorists with a big C and a big T, who have believed really big C, really big T conspiracy theories, and they have changed their minds despite being committed conspiracy theorists in this general sense. Although I should note, he does have the get out clause aren't too many examples. So all the examples we can put forward of, well, here's a conspiracy theorist, capital C, capital T, who's changed their mind. Because I'm going, well, I did say there
Yes,
aren't
that's one
too
of the
many
exceptions that
examples.
prove the rule.
Yeah, yeah. I just think there's going to be a lot more exceptions than he's actually willing to bite the bullet on.
Mm.
So Kassam goes on to say we have a bit of a dilemma on our hands. On one hand, engaging with conspiracy theories, capital C, capital T, gives both the conspiracy theories and the conspiracy theorists undeserved attention. And that's a problem. We don't want to draw people's attention to this right wing propaganda, anti Semitic set of beliefs. But at the same time, not engaging with them would allow these capital C, capital T conspiracy theories to proliferate. So, what are we to do? And so he moves on quite naturally to talk about the solution that Sunstein and Vermeule came up with, which
Yes,
he
you knew they
initially,
were going to be showing up here, didn't you?
yeah, and initially he defends it by saying this is definitely not a case of these two people, one of which is attached to the Obama administration at the time of publication of the original article, spying on conspiracy theorists. So, I mean, there's nothing that untoward happening here. Instead, he criticizes Sunstein and Vermeule's plan because it will suffer from the backfire effect. So, for people who don't remember Sunstein and Vermeule's solution for conspiracy theories, and once again, these are conspiracy theories in the lowercase variety. They claim the best way to do it would be to dissuade conspiracy theorists from believing their conspiracy theories by getting government operatives to infiltrate the fora that conspiracy theorists hang out in, and thus put in information to try to dissuade people from believing those conspiracy theories, which most right minded people have pointed out sounds like it is in fact a conspiracy against conspiracy theorists, the kind of thing that if conspiracy theorists found out there was a conspiracy going on against them, would confirm some of their views about the existence of the very conspiracies that their conspiracy theories are centered around. So Kassam doesn't deal with that particular part because he doesn't take it that it has that particular flaw. Rather, it's going to suffer from the backfire effect because conspiracy theories in the uppercase variety are self sealing in nature. So any evidence that these infiltrators put forward against a conspiracy theory is going to be accounted for by the capital C, capital T conspiracy theorists because they'll simply take the evidence against the capital C, capital T conspiracy theory as being evidence for the capital C, capital T conspiracy theory. So he's now added on to his list of characteristics of things that mark these conspiracy theories in the uppercase out as being special, that they also have a self sealing aspect. Which means that in chapter 4 of the book, he's still supplementing and adding to the definition he provided back in chapter 1.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could argue that the features he already mentioned imply this already, but it does seem a little bit late in the day to be adding on to it.
Yeah, so he goes on to say, they would say that, wouldn't they, is the conspiracy theorist, capital C, capital T, stock response to government officials who dispute their theories. Contrary evidence is dismissed either as fake news or as part of the conspiracy. It's hard to win an argument with a person whose fundamental assumptions and ways of thinking are completely different from yours. And he also adds, conspiracy theories aren't just theories, they are expressions of a particular view about how the world works and can't be shaken without changing the conspiracy theorist, capital C, capital T, overall worldview. This is just not something that can be done by quoting official studies and experts. A person with a conspiracy theorist worldview is obviously going to see the studies and expert as tainted. And now, this once again raises the question of who these conspiracy theorists are. And he's talked about JFK conspiracy theories. We'll go into that in more detail in a minute. He's talked about 9/11 conspiracy theorists. And it's not quite clear that he actually knows what JFK conspiracy theorists or 9/11 conspiracy theorists believe, because if you were to actually sit him down and talk through the varieties of, say, 9/11 conspiracy theories, I wonder what he would make of Lehop theories, which I take it are at least a plausible cluster of 9/11 conspiracy theories. The idea that maybe it is the case that Al Qaeda committed the event, but maybe there was information that was known in advance, that either wasn't acted upon because there were officials or members of the government who wanted a war in the Middle East, or it wasn't acted upon because the information was downplayed and the downplaying of that information is now being covered up subsequently. It seems that there are at least clusters of these capital C, capital T conspiracy theories in which people are debating the evidence. They are having discussions about how to cope with the evidence, and they aren't necessarily self sealing in the way that Kassam wants to make them out to be.
Yeah, I don't have enough experience perhaps with some of this to say that to say exactly the nature of these kinds of debates within conspiracy theory communities. But up until now, he has been talking in very general terms about what sounds like a stereotype more than anything.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, given that, especially back in chapter 3, he was talking about these conspiracy theorists' conspiracy apologists' views don't survive contact with reality. I wonder if his stereotype is the same.
Yes, and if you just spent some time looking at what various conspiracy theorists believe, and you look at things like the JFK community of conspiracy theorists or the general set of 9/11 conspiracy theorists. So this is a audio podcast and I just did scare quotes around the set there because I'm aware that 9/11 conspiracy theory communities are vexatious in and amongst themselves. There are huge debates amongst members of that community as to what are acceptable and unacceptable theories to put forward. You'd be aware of just how much evidence is debated within those communities. And it isn't necessarily the case that just because the government says it, they'll go, oh, well, that must be part of the conspiracy. Some part of the evidence used by those conspiracy theorists, whether they are Kassam's capital C, capital T, or just standard lowercase conspiracy theorists, is using evidence by the government to pursue or dismiss particular theoretical claims within their community. So it's just not clear who he's talking about here when he talks about these people suffering from self-sealing beliefs. That being said, he does think that one of the best ways to approach this topic would be to look at moderate conspiracy theory beliefs, and that's moderate capital C, capital T conspiracy theory beliefs. He writes, a more promising and worthwhile target of rebuttal efforts is people with a weaker commitment to conspiracy theories, or the presumably large numbers of those who are curious about such theories, maybe even receptive to them, without yet being true believers. This is where there is some hope of getting somewhere. What is needed is a strategy that has a realistic chance of dissuading the undecided or moderate conspiracy theorists from fully going over to the dark side. The most seductive and serious conspiracy theories are politically motivated, but also have some semblance of intellectual respectability. An effective strategy for countering the spread of such theories will need to have both an intellectual and political dimension. Now, I'm not quite sure who are these moderate conspiracy theorists of the capital C, capital T variety. I'm not entirely sure how they fit into his schema of what counts as belief in a conspiracy theory, and thus who count as being a conspiracy theorist. If it turns out there's moderate belief in these conspiracy theories of a capital C, capital T variety, aren't we actually just talking about conspiracy theories sans capitalization?
Yeah, I mean, earlier on he described as conspiracy theorists as people who are. Actually, no. Was that his definition, or was that his statement of David's definition? A person who is unusually willing to investigate conspiracy. Actually, that's what he said. David said, but I guess you could give him an out here if he's seeing a conspiracy theorist with a capital C and a capital T as someone who is more predisposed than others to want to believe in these things. So then you wouldn't have to say there's someone who definitely believes in any given one, but Yeah, we're introducing nuance in the fourth chapter of four, where previously everything's been quite general. So it is a bit of a swerve at this point.
Yes, and now we're going to swerve into expertise. So he points out that there are some conspiracy theories which are so fantastical that we don't even need to engage with them seriously. So David Icke's alien shapeshifting reptiles, for example. And as he points out, some conspiracy theories are complex and seem to have at least intellectual foundations. So he says, look, because of that, because some conspiracy theories at least have the visage of being intellectually respectable, then what we need to do is just talk to the experts, rely on expert testimony, and use those experts against the believers of those capital C, capital T conspiracy theories. And so he moves on to JFK conspiracy theories and moves on to a rather problematic example, Gerald Posner's book, Case Closed. So, Gerald Posner's book, Case Closed, is one of the core texts in JFK studies. If you want to say JFK conspiracy theories, i.e., that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't the sole assassin of President Kennedy, it's the lead text you refer to say, look, all those conspiracy theories are bunk. On an amusing side, in a recent reading group session for the conspiracy theory social club I run, Curtis Hagen pointed out that it is kind of curious that skeptics of JFK conspiracy theories are happy to admit they've read one book and only one book, which they think covers all the bases of JFK conspiracy theories, without actually asking, is Gerald Posner's book actually any good? They take it as being a definitive read and a case closed on what happened in Dallas on November 21st, 1963, which also reminds me this is a little bit like how people say, oh, all the President's Men shows that Woodward and Bernstein weren't conspiracy theorists, showing they've never read the book because Woodward and Bernstein are very happy to admit that for the first 6 months of the Watergate investigation they ran for the Washington Post, they were really going out on a limb there and had no real evidence of a conspiracy by the Nixon White House. They were just going with their gut feelings on that particular issue. But for Kassam, the issue was this. Kassam was saying, look, we should refer to experts when rebutting conspiracy theories. The problem is, Case Closed was not written by an expert. Gerald Posner is a journalist. I think that actually might be was a journalist. I actually don't know whether he's still alive or not. If we had some kind of researcher who could just check the internet, we could check that with ease. But we'll just never know. Gerald Posner is now a Schrodinger's cat of researchers. So he was a journalist. He is not a forensic specialist. He's not a historian. And indeed, one of the problems with the book Case Closed is that actual experts in history and sociology have criticized Posner for historical inaccuracies and factual inaccuracies in his presentation of the case that says that Lee Harvey Oswald was the person who was the sole assassin of President Kennedy. So even though I largely agree with Posner's conclusions that Lee Harvey Oswald is the most likely person to have killed JFK and probably wasn't helped by anyone else, Posner is not the kind of expert that Kassam says we should be referring to when rebutting conspiracy theories. Posner is an amateur. He's a dedicated and interested amateur, but he is not an expert. And yet Kassam is quite happy to appeal to him when it comes to rebuting. Rebuting? Is that a word? Refuting?
Refuting, I think, sounds more
Refuting is
like it.
a
Yes.
much more cromulent use of that word
I
when it
agree.
comes to refuting conspiracy theories in the capital C, capital T sense about the death of JFK.
Yeah, all of his talk about amateur versus expert or for all of his talk about amateur versus expert in the previous chapters, yeah, it seems odd to use that as an example.
Now, here's a better example talking about David Irving and how Irving was rebutted by the British historian Richard Evans. And so, this is an actual case of Richard Evans, an expert, rebutting someone who wasn't an expert. Although, the interesting thing about the Irving case was that Irving, like Andrew Wakefield, was taken to be an expert at least one point in time. It was when Irving started making claims of, well, there's not much evidence actually for the Holocaust in the Nazi files, that historians started going, I mean, that doesn't seem right. And then they started looking back over Irving's earlier writings and went, we kind of glossed over some of the historical inaccuracies in his accounting here. Irving is not quite the expert he presented himself to be. But it is the case that Richard Evans, who was instrumental, although I should also point out, not the sole reason that Irving was shown to be a Holocaust denier, was an expert who was able to show that Irving's claims were incorrect. But then Kassam, for some reason, makes the following claim. The historian David Irving has for many years promoted the idea that Hitler didn't order the extermination of the Jews in Europe. In support of this claim, he quotes a phone log of a conversation between two senior Nazis in 1941 concerning an order supposedly given by Hitler to the effect there was to be no liquidation of the Jews. For non specialists, it can be hard to rebut such claims, and this might account for the growth of conspiracy theories about the Holocaust. Now, David Irving is a Holocaust denier. David Irving is a terrible human being. David Irving has at least contributed to the evidential base, in scare quotes, that Holocaust deniers use. But he is not responsible for the growth in Holocaust denial. It was, to put in scare quotes, doing fine well before David Irving came on the scene.
Yes, overstating things a little bit there. I mean, he's, as you say, he's a good example of the sort of thing Kasama's talking about. Maybe he just got a little bit carried away with wanting to say how
Well, yeah, and
influential his
that's the problem
example,
with
chosen example, was.
both of these examples. He overstates the expertise of Posner to make a point which is actually somewhat contrary to his own thesis. And then he has to kind of overstate the power of David Irving to show how bad he was as a conspiracy theorist, capital C, capital T. You don't need to overstate how bad David Irving was. David Irving is a terrible human being, is a Holocaust denier. He is a case of someone who, if not a capital C, capital T conspiracy theorist, certainly the kind of person that Charles Pigden and David Cody would say is putting forward a deservedly suspicious conspiracy theory.
Hmm. So where does he
So,
go from
yeah,
there
there's a
then?
problem here with expertise, and it's very, very confounding.
Hmm. So where to from there? Is that his last word on expertise, or does he take it even further?
Well, it seems ultimately what Kasama's arguing about when it comes to conspiracy theories in the uppercase is that we can rely upon experts telling us which conspiracy theories are false, which is, of course, a recipe for the powerful to tell us that conspiracy theories in the lowercase are conspiracy theories in the uppercase. Indeed, the fact he points out that governments often promote conspiracy theories in the uppercase, which leads to people reacting to those conspiracy theories in the uppercase with conspiracy theories in the uppercase of their own, compounds the issue. And he seems to recognize this because, and I quote, a political response to conspiracy theories in the uppercase will need to do at least three things: make the case that many uppercase conspiracy theories are forms of political propaganda rather than serious attempts to tell the truth, show that one can criticize capital C, capital T conspiracy theories without being an apologist for government misconduct, and be careful to respect the distinction between conspiracy theories in the uppercase and conspiracy theories in the lowercase. In addition, obviously enough, there is one thing that an effective political response to conspiracy theory should definitely refrain from doing, namely promoting and spreading a different set of conspiracy theories. Now, I don't think he's convincingly shown that capital C, capital T conspiracy theories are always forms of political propaganda. Indeed, he even admits there are some examples of what appear to be capital C, capital T conspiracy theories, like the Elvis is dead set of conspiracy theories that seem to have no political content whatsoever. He doesn't seem to respect that the people that he puts forward as conspiracy apologists are people who actually do make a distinction between conspiracy theories in the lowercase and conspiracy theories in the uppercase. And thirdly, he's not even careful in maintaining that distinction, despite the fact he claims that's something we need to respect.
Yes, that bit at the end saying you should definitely refrain from promoting and spreading a different set of conspiracy theories, was that a reference to Sunstein and Vermeulen, or is it just a general point he's making there?
I think it's just a general point he's making there.
Because because you sort of said before he didn't criticize Sunstein and Vermeulen for the things that people usually do, but that almost sounded like he was. But maybe I'm giving him too much credit.
Yeah, that might be an inadvertent criticism of Sunstein and
Mm.
Vermeulen in this particular case. Now, he does say he's had success in dissuading left wing people from believing conspiracy theories by pointing out that they're right wing propaganda. And this is a snide point on my part, but I do wonder, did he really have success in that? Or did he do that thing where you hit someone over the head with your argument so much you go, "Oh yeah, fine, okay, I don't believe that theory anymore." Turns head, continues talking about that theory to someone else in the conversation, because I can't quite see how this is a convincing argument. Josh, that conspiracy theory you believe about the invasion of Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, that's anti-Semitic right-wing propaganda. You don't believe that now, do, do you? I've dissuaded you from believing that theory again in future, right? Right?
Completely,
Right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, also anecdotal data isn't very useful in a philosophical argument, truth be told. Anyway, but yes, let us try to bring this chapter to its eventual conclusion. So here's a section. Here's a section I think we should talk about. A factor in the thinking of many conspiracy apologists, if not conspiracy theorists themselves, capital C, capital T, once again making that really close relationship between being a conspiracy apologist and a capital C, capital T conspiracy theorist, is the concern that people who attack uppercase conspiracy theories are, if not actual government agents, still doing the government's dirty work. After all, it's undeniable that uppercase conspiracy theories tend to identify the government or its agents as conspirators. It's also undeniable that there is plenty of evidence of government misconduct in liberal democracies as well as in totalitarian states. One can argue about how often that misconduct takes the form of conspiracies, but there can be no debate about the frequency with which governments of all political persuasions in all political systems behave badly and expect to get away with it. That being so, does it follow that being a critic of uppercase conspiracy theories means being an apologist for the poor behavior of people in power that uppercase conspiracy theories are trying to highlight? From this standpoint, it doesn't particularly matter whether a particular uppercase conspiracy theory is literally true. It's interesting he's now saying that he's intimating an uppercase conspiracy theory could be true. What matters is the bigger picture, the fact that governments and their agents are often up to no good. The general point still stands regardless of the merits of a given conspiracy theory in the uppercase. Once again, now these uppercase conspiracy theories might have some evidence going for them, and people who attack conspiracy theories in the uppercase are denying a deeper truth about politics and power to which these theories give expression. And I want to know, given what he's just written there, how he squares this with his talk of philosophers as conspiracy apologists, because he writes, it's easier for governments to dismiss criticism of their conduct if they can point to factual inaccuracies in these criticisms. A good rule of thumb for government critics should be not to do anything to diminish their own credibility. And this means not flirting with speculative and esoteric conspiracy theories in the uppercase for which there is no real evidence. Not worrying about the literal truth of one's accusations and focusing on the bigger picture is self defeating because it's easier for other people to ignore the bigger picture when they can point to obvious flaws in one's theories. It's always best to stick with known facts and avoid ill formed speculation. And I want to know, how have these conspiracy apologists of David Cody and Charles Pigden done this? I mean, isn't he actually describing the kind of philosophical view that both Charles and David are trying to put forward?
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, I'm really not sure where he's coming from, to be honest. Reading this sort of thing, he earlier on he just flat out stated that the two of them are conspiracy apologists, having given a fairly clear definition of it that relied on his capital C, capital T conspiracy theories. So then to be, yeah, because I assume he doesn't refer to David and Charles by name in this bit. He's just straight
No,
talking about
no, it's
conspiracy
just,
apologists. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So it's
And it
almost
gets
like he's
worse.
forgotten that he specifically labelled these people, specific individuals, earlier up when he's talking about things in general down here.
Yeah, and it gets worse because he writes, an effective political strategy against conspiracy theories in the uppercase needs to stress the distinction between conspiracy theories in the uppercase and conspiracy theories in the lowercase. Failure to do so leaves one open to accusations of bad faith or naivete. Conspiracy theorists like to defend their theories by pointing to well documented examples of actual conspiracies such as Watergate or Operation Northwoods. In reply, one needs to acknowledge that theories about conspiracies can be well founded. However, to state the obvious, just because some theories about conspiracies are well founded, it doesn't follow that they all are. The plausibility of one conspiracy theory doesn't extend to all others. On the other hand, accepting that some conspiracy theories have turned out to be true should help to correct any impression that one can see no wrong when it comes to government conduct. And once again, isn't this what David and Charles are advocating for? They are the ones who are making the distinction between, look, if we're going to talk about conspiracy theories, we do need to realize there are some bad conspiracy theories out there, and also some which turn out to be justified beliefs. And so we need to be careful about the kind of examples we use and the way we use evidence, and we shouldn't use a broad brush to generalize about these things. And yet, apparently, this is a problem for the conspiracy apologists, even though, as Kassam described them in chapter 3, this is what they're doing.
Yeah, he doesn't even countenance the possibility of sort of a particularist viewpoint. He's decided right up the top that yes, we can make these general distinctions between his capital C conspiracy theories and lowercase conspiracy theories, and therefore you need to make this distinction if you're going to talk about them. But yeah, he doesn't. He certainly doesn't argue against particularism. He's just sort of put forward his own view as though that's the only possible one, but hasn't argued for that.
And as you'll have probably noted, there's not much discussion of the philosophical literature in this book. So you get Brian, you get Steve Clark, you get Charles Pigden, you get David Cody, and that's about it. There might be a reference to Yuhao Reicher's work somewhere in there as well. But for a book written and published in 2019, there's not much discussion of the quite big literature on conspiracy theories in philosophy at this time. It's
Especially since
rather
he went
weird.
right back to Brian's 1999 paper when he was talking about him as well.
And he notes in the introduction that his earlier work in the monist had been criticized, which is why he's changed his view on conspiracy theories. So he's willing to admit there was sustained criticism of that view. And one of the people who engaged in sustained criticism of that view was myself. And yet, references to the literature are kept to a minimum in this book, almost as if he's not willing to read what philosophers have to say and is willing to select just a few papers to get a general gist of it without ever engaging with the literature.
Hmm. So are we
Mm,
done? Are we
mm.
at the end? Or is there a little
Well,
bit
we are,
more?
because he ends the chapter with his multi-track strategy for dealing with conspiracy theories and the people who promote them. And there are three components to this strategy. And Josh, I want to see what you think of these stratagems. Stratagem
Mhm.
one, rebuttal. Wherever possible, use arguments and evidence to rebut conspiracy theories.
I mean, that sounds fair enough. Um, if you can mount um, a competing argument, I guess, and you can appeal to facts and what have you, then there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that.
Now, admittedly, he's already said that conspiracy theorists have a self sealing belief system, so they're just not going to accept arguments and evidence against them. But maybe he's more concerned about those moderate
The
conspiracy
ones on the
theorists.
fence,
This,
yes.
yeah, this new class that isn't adequately defined. All right, stratagem two. Education. Equip people at an early age with the critical thinking skills and intellectual virtues that will help them to distinguish between truth and lies, information and disinformation. But education must also include moral education about the evils of the racist and extremist ideologies that is the function of conspiracy theories to promote.
I mean, it doesn't sound too bad. It sounds a lot like what Neil Levy concluded at the end of his book. So, the moral education about the evils of racist and extremist ideologies. I mean, yeah, I guess that is something people should be made aware of. Although he then chucks his own little "that is the function of conspiracy theories to promote." That was his.
Yeah,
That's
it's one
been
of those
his
stratagems.
view in the
It
book. But
starts well, and then you go, not quite sure about these additions you keep adding on here, but the first part's great.
yes,
And stratagem three, outing. Make sure that people have a proper understanding of the function of conspiracy theories as propaganda and of the causes they promote.
I mean, that kind of sounds like yes, outing. Make sure that everybody agrees with me. That seemed to be going specifically for here are the points that I've been putting forward in this book, and so everybody needs to make sure they agree with that. I mean, it doesn't sound on the face of it. It doesn't sound terrible, but it also sounds a lot like he's just kind of putting himself up as the be all and end all of what we should do about conspiracy theories.
And also, wasn't that just part of education? Because the education part has about
Well, you'd think so.
the
Yeah, yeah.
the evils of conspiracy theory. So it's actually two stratagems, but two stratagems always looks weird when
Mm.
it's paginated. So you have to have three. But the third one is actually the second one just reiterated.
It pretty much is actually, yes, yeah.
Yeah. And so he finishes the book with, we need to be as relentless in opposing conspiracy theories, capital C, capital T, as the conspiracy theorists, capital C, capital T, are in spreading them. If this book has a single take home message, it is this: conspiracy theories are harmful. To understand this and to understand all the different ways in which they are harmful is to understand that not fighting back against them is simply not an option.
It gets quite, what's the word, polemical
Polemic. Yeah. Yeah.
as far as it goes on. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was definitely turned off the whole thing by chapter 3, where he starts getting footloose and fancy free with his definitions, and he really doesn't. I mean, he certainly doesn't. He doesn't consider and argue against opposing positions to his, which he must know there are. So yeah, it all to me ended up being a bit kind of I don't know, self-serving perhaps.
Which is why part 3 is going to be interesting, because in the year of our Lord 2023, Kassam wrote an article for the journal Society. And it's basically a summary of this book. Can you guess what the name of the article is?
Is it Conspiracy Theories? Same as the book?
It is, very confusingly. He
Yes.
wrote a book in 2019 called Conspriacy Theories, and then wrote an article in 2023, well, published in January of 2023, so written in 2022, also called Conspiracy Theories. I think there should be a law against that because it makes talking about conspiracy theories versus conspiracy theories quite difficult. So we're going to have the issue of when we review that article in the next episode, not just well, actually, so I'm about to say not just distinguishing between conspiracy theories with capital C's, capital T's, and conspiracy theories with lower case C's and lowercase T's, but also the book Conspiracy Theories and then his modification of the view of the article Conspiracy Theories. But Josh, I do have a boon to give you.
Mm-hmm. What is? Tell me of this
He's
boon.
so in the 2023 article, he's given up on the capitalization.
Good? Does that make it more or less
No,
confusing?
that makes it worse.
Right,
But
so
we'll
he
talk
is
about
he
that
is
in a
still
fortnight.
okay. I cannot wait. I'm abuzz with anticipation.
You're palpitating
I'm
with
I'm
anticipation.
literally palpitating as we speak. Can we stop talking about this now? Have a little bit
Yeah,
of
because
news,
we'll
perhaps?
give our
Little bit
final
of,
thoughts
little
at
bit of,
the end of the surprise part 3.
yeah. So before we go, a little bit of news, which we're not putting in the bonus episodes anymore, but there are a couple of things we really should talk about. So maybe a news chime would be in order.
Yeah, let's put a news chime in right about here. Breaking conspiracy theories in the news. So, Josh, Trump almost got assassinated. Almost got assassinated. Didn't actually get assassinated or actually got shot. He almost got assassinated.
Yes, someone almost attempted to assassinate him, but was stopped before they could go forward with their attempt.
And because he was out golfing. And I'm telling you, golf is a terrible sport, and this is more evidence of why people shouldn't golf.
To be honest, I've heard relatively little about this one. I mean, I guess obviously the previous attempt actually, came close enough that it drew blood. So whereas this one was just a guy got picked up who was on his way to try and assassinate Trump, but never got the opportunity is less newsworthy.
It is kind of indicating that people don't seem to actually care that much about the attempts on Donald Trump's life, which seems slightly fascinating in an election season that could decide the fate of America.
Yeah, so and not having heard much about it, there was a bit of discussion earlier on. I gather the guy was again similar. Obviously, what wasn't a clear, rabid Democrat anti-Trump person. He seemed to be again like the previous one, a bit more central in his views, and certainly had supported Trump in the past in some areas. But I have not heard any particular sort of conspiracy theories around this one, but I assume there have been some.
Well, he did go to Ukraine in order to try to sign up for the military there to aid Ukraine in repelling Russia, which of course has led to people like Alex Jones saying he's a deep state plant who belongs to the American military, etc., etc. I imagine we'll probably have more information about him there because I think he was only properly arraigned for whatever they're going to try to prosecute him for as of today this time in the US at time of recording. I'm actually quite curious to know what they've charged him with because they can't charge him with attempted assassination because he didn't actually attempt to assassinate Trump. It was simply thought that had he come within
attempted
range of Trump, he
yeah.
would have attempted to assassinate him, but they stopped him before the attempt of assassination could be attempted. So he's probably going to go with a firearms charge. And that's going to be difficult for the Republicans to fight against because they're all for people having guns.
Yes, we'll have to see. Yeah, can't not mention it, but I don't know that there's a hell of a lot to say at this particular point in time.
The thing which struck me when I was thinking about it before we started recording today is that when Trump first ran for president and we brought in the Trumpatorium, we brought it in because there's just too much discussion of Trump
Mm.
related conspiracy theories in that 2016 election. And I don't know whether it's because the media has become inured to it, but there seems to be less focus on the conspiratorial aspect of the things Trump says and more focus on the he's just a bit of a bumbling idiot when he speaks, and JD Vance just lies about things all the time.
Mm.
And I just don't know whether it's because my media habits have changed or whether the media has changed, but we don't seem to have as much Trump conspiracy related news this time around.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, I think it may be, as you say, just sort of a bit of fatigue, which often seemed to be their strategy. Just so many gaffes and blunders and inappropriate stuff that it eventually just all blurred into one, and nobody paid any attention to individual things that he did. So maybe, yeah, maybe their strategy has worked, and that's why we're not seeing as many, which is possibly a worry. Um,
Mm.
but maybe it's just because people are less interested in talking about the guy, which is possibly positive. I don't know.
Hard to tell. I guess
Hmm.
we'll make that decision after the election.
Yes, I think we might have to. And
Now,
the other
now,
thing, yes, the other thing
yeah,
that we really
yeah.
can't let go without comment is the exploding pages in Lebanon. When I first heard the stories about it, people didn't seem entirely clear on the mechanism by which it happened. There was, to begin with, there was a sort of a James Bond kind of a theory that these were just ordinary pages and people had discovered a way that you can like send a magical signal to it and immediately overload its battery and make it explode or something. But I gather now the theory is that no, these were things that had been rigged and were made and it was engineered so that they would fall into the hands of Hezbollah people. Is that the
Yes,
current?
because it turns out that Hezbollah leadership has been using Pages as a communication system for a while now because they thought it was a system which basically couldn't be hacked. So, because Pages, which work on a fairly antique SMS style system, you have a central system that sends a message out. So, thus, you can't really locate the pages. The pages simply locate the kind of central hub that messages are being sent from. And it seems that whoever is responsible for the attack, and we should point out that at this stage, the government of Israel and Mossad have not taken responsibility for the attack, but they have done the jolly good show. I can't imagine who would have
Whoever it
done
was who
that,
did this, yes, good job.
which occurred within a few days before Israel started attacking Lebanon to escalate de escalation, according to Prime Minister
Yes,
Benjamin Netanyahu. They need to escalate the situation with Hezbollah in order to produce de escalation in the region, which is like having sex for virginity. It just seems like one of those things.
yeah.
I don't think the words mean anything, let alone what you're trying to imply that they mean. But yeah, so no one has actually formally taken responsibility, but it is very likely that it's a Mossad operation in Lebanon where they've managed to get a whole bunch of pages or have managed to get at the production line of a whole bunch of pages, introduce explosive elements into those pages, and then have the pages distributed in Lebanon without anyone being aware that they have been doctored. And there's a really big question as to who built the pages because they're branded as Gold Apollo pages, which would suggest they come from the Taiwanese company of the same name, who do indeed produce pages. But Gold Apollo have said no, they license that particular brand out to a Hungarian company, BAC Consulting KFT. And so there seems to be a lot of blame being shared around as to who built the pages and thus where the interception of materials actually occurred.
Yeah, so everything's very unclear again at this point, but there's no denying that some sort of conspiracy was involved. So we can't not mention it, and it does seem to be sort of a new.
No,
I guess a new thing, but I I don't know how much of a sort of a new front in warfare this is going to be, given that it was targeting a basically obsolete technology that was only being used by this particular case. So I don't know. As a lot of people have also said it, given that it's sort of less discriminate, not completely indiscriminate. If it was targeted, if these things were deliberately given to people in Hezbollah, but it doesn't seem to be forming a specific sort of military objective, and it's more about a psychological objective, which fits the definition of terrorism quite nicely. So it's possibly not
yes.
surprising that any state actors haven't taken responsibility for it, because there would be some fairly pointed questions to answer at that stage.
Yes, it does seem like a textbook definition of a terror attack.
Mm.
So,
So,
yeah.
so interesting times. Interesting times. You know what else is interesting? The first chapter of your book, probably
Well, then we
to
should
you at least. I'm
probably
sure.
talk about that in a
Yeah.
patron bonus episode. I'm also now thinking, given that the last two news segments we've had have been ever so slightly depressing, we should probably do the news before we do the main content of the episode, because otherwise we end up going, yep, and then a terrorist attack occurred. Let's do a patron bonus episode. Let's try to get that energy up.
Yes. Yeah, no, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to stop recording this episode. We're going to record a bonus episode for our bonus patrons who deserve all the bonuses we can heap upon them. And if you wish to add yourself to their number, you can go to patreon.com and look for the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. Just sign yourself up and you'll get access to as many patron bonus episodes as we can funnel into your face holes. And that's a fact.
You're so aggressive with our patrons, always forcing them to listen to episodes, funneling things into face holes.
It's what's best for them, and I
Well,
really have no more
then I cannot
justification.
disagree. All
Yeah,
I can say is bone us. No, bone you.
exactly. And on that erudite soundbite, I think it's time to go. And I know it's time to go, in fact, because now is the time when I say goodbye.
And I say good day, sir. I say good day. The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy stars Josh Addison and myself, Associate Professor MRX Dentith. Our show's producers are Tom and Philip, plus another mysterious anonymous donor. You can contact Josh and myself at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com, and please do consider joining our Patreon. And remember, they're coming to get you, Barbara.